Well, we can do the minutes. All we've got is the minutes before it.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order, and Renee, can I please have a roll call?
Mr. Brewer,
Here.
Mr. Parker,
Here.
Ms. McCowan,
Here.
Mr. McDaniel, Ms. Byrd,
Here?
Mr. McClure, Mr. Griffith,
Here.
Mr. Axton,
Here.
Mr. Jablonski.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Moving to our consent docket, item number 1, consideration of approval, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of the minutes of the September 8th, 2022 regular Planning Commission meeting. Does any member of the commission wish to remove any item from the consent docket? Does any member of the audience wish to remove any item from the consent docket?
Number 2.
From the consent
It's not
docket.
on consent.
Consent docket is item 1 for minutes.
Minutes.
Sorry.
That's okay. Seeing none, I would take a motion for approval for the minutes, the consent items,
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
and a vote.
My computer doesn't work.
Touch it.
There you go.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 7-0.
Moving to non-consent items. Item number 2, consideration of adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2223-14, Midway Grocery, Inc., requests rezoning from C1 Local Commercial District to SPUD, Simple Planned Unit Development for 0.234 acres of property located at 601 West Eufaula Street. We were notified today that protests amounting to over 20% of the notification area triggered a requirement for a pre-development meeting. The applicant has requested postponement of the item to the December 8th Planning Commission meeting in order to accommodate that additional meeting. The pre-development meeting will be November 17th. So unless we can discuss this further, if there is any additional discussion on this item, otherwise I would take a motion for postponement.
Move to postpone.
Second?
I did have a question. Do we know what time that pre-development meeting is?
They, I believe, start at 6:30.
They,
It depends on how many applications we get.
Okay.
We don't have all of them yet, so.
we don't have any of them yet.
The meetings actually start at
5:30.
5:30, and then they go in order as depending on how many applications are in there. So it would start at any point as early as 5:30 p.m. December 8th, 2022. No, I'm sorry, November 17th, 2022, to be voted on December 8th, 2022. What is the notification for pre-development meetings? What's the time frame that those delivery notices go out? Does anyone know those? Is it 30 days?
No, it's 10.
Okay, so the exact time would, and a notice would go out to a 300-foot radius? 350-foot radius of nearby residents within 10 days of the pre-development meeting.
At least 10 days.
And then that'll also be available on the City of Norman website. So everyone knows where to find that information. Any other questions? Any other concerns before we move on to the vote for the motion on the floor to approve a postponement? Okay, I'd take a vote.
Okay, you may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion to postpone carried 7-0.
Moving to item number 3, consideration of adoption, rejection, amendment, and/or postponement of ordinance number O-2223-15, McFarland Memorial United Methodist Church, Inc., requests rezoning from CCFBC Center City Form-Based Code to CCPUD Center City Planned Unit Development for 0.32 acres of property located at 401 South University Boulevard. And I would take the staff presentation on that.
Good evening. Anna Eastar with the Planning Department. This is, sorry, you're going to have to bear with me. I don't usually do this one. It is this, right? Okay. Yes, so as stated, this is a request from Center City Form-Based Code to a CCPUD. This is the existing zoning for this area. As you can see, Center City surrounds the parcel. The parcel is designated urban residential within the Center City Form-Based Code, as well as the parcels to the east and west and south, and you can see that a little bit closer on this one. All the parcels around these are Center City Form-Based Code with urban residential designation. To the north is detached designation within the Center City Form-Based Code. This is the land use. As you can see, this is McFarland Church here. The parcel subject tract is here. And it's surrounded by church facilities on the east, west, and south side. The north side has 2 residential properties. And then here's an aerial showing the parcel, subject parcel, with the existing food pantry on it. And here is the view from the street, looking back east towards the food pantry, and then here's looking north towards those 2 residential properties, and then to the south towards the church and towards the intersection of Apache and University. And then this is to the west towards the McFarland Church parking lot. So again, the existing zoning on this property, as mentioned, is Center City Planned Unit Development. Here's their proposal. They would like to expand that footprint of the existing food pantry and make that also a food pantry plus a mission center, a community mission center. They're having to request this rezoning because the CCPUD does not accommodate the uses associated with a community mission center. Here's their elevation drawings attached to their CCPUD, and their CCPUD, let me go back, their CCPUD narrative lays out the community mission uses, that there are associated uses with this facility that there will be. And they, in addition to the CCPUD narrative, there's also attached to these exhibits of their elevation drawings, as well as how they're going to handle the runoff that's created because this is a larger building. And then we did receive one protest from the property at the northwest corner of University and Sims. And with that, we can forward this to the commission for your consideration. And I can answer any questions if you have any of me. The applicant is here as well with a presentation.
Thank you. Any questions for staff from the commission?
I have one question. The project looks like a great project, but as far as the stormwater management goes, I'm curious, did you all use historical rainfall data or projected future rainfall?
Well, I think they have both of that information in here, but that is something I'll let the applicant answer, as I am just the staff person, but they have done those calculations, and they believe their applicant and the engineer is here as well.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, we take the applicant presentation.
Other way. See, you know how to do this, Sean. You're here every night.
No, you're doing great.
You hear that every night?
Yeah, every night, yeah, sometimes. So thank you, Madam Chairman, Commissioners, thank you, and Anais, thank you. Commissioner, we will have the stormwater engineer come up in just a moment and answer your question. But first, let me just say this is a very exciting night for McFarland. So exciting. Let me tell you, when we came close to this night and the leadership of McFarland asked me, how many people do you want to come to speak for McFarland? I usually answer that by saying, well, you know, as many as you can have come. And then I stopped myself realizing that would probably be about 1,000 people that would show up here and be in front of you. And so I stopped myself and said, let's just bring a few and show them your passion. They are very passionate about this project, rightfully so. McFarland is a church that has a long history of mission work in our community, and this is to go to the next level of mission work for our community. They've had a pantry on this site for a long time. This will significantly increase the size of that pantry, and they already know how to do it. They do it all the time. This will give them a facility that will enable them to reach new heights with it. So let me take you quickly through it. Anais has already showed you most of this, but I want to make sure we answer your questions. The design team is all here, as is the leadership of McFarland. So let me show you, as Anais showed you, it's Sims and University. You see the existing 2025, no change. It's already shown as institutional, and on the right is urban residential frontage. I would say it's close to being allowable uses because civic uses are allowed here. And when you look at the code of CCFBC for civic uses, churches are in that. And then it's just a question of whether the mission work is part of civic uses or not. So I would suggest it is a close call as to whether this was already allowed by a matter of right. But nonetheless, we want to be good stewards. So we're here with the CCPUD to make sure that you have the ability to approve of that. This is the site plan in context, and you see the red outline is the actual building. The yellow outline is the site. You see the McFarland Church, the historic building that the McFarland community is so proud of there on the corner, and this is just behind it. There is a little house there now that has served as the pantry for quite some time. That would be replaced by this facility as it goes. Rick McKinney, the designer of this facility, is here tonight to talk to you about any details you wish to hear more about. But basically, it's a two-story building with the food pantry and the food operation on the first floor and with the drive-through on the side. Now, this is operated as a drive-through for quite some time in the alley on the south side. This will enable them to have a much more robust ability to offer that drive-through on the side with 2 lanes and with just much more ability of volume to do it. It will be a pantry much like what we just did not long ago with Food and Shelter. You recall that we just approved one for Food and Shelter, I believe it was last year, and we used that list from Food and Shelter to mimic for this PUD to make sure without, of course, the homeless residency and the residential component, but the uses otherwise are very similar to that in terms of the mission work and the pantry. The architecture, really well done by Rick and his team always. I think importantly, we have tried to mimic the classic green roof that McFarland has and that has become so known in that community and that area. This will mimic that with the brick with the green roof on top. The architecture, we have tried very closely to emulate the CCFBC code as it requires the architecture to be done in this area. And I'll show you the images again. Rick is here to talk in detail if you wish, but I know I was asked to keep it to 4 minutes before I started, so I'm going to do that as quickly as I can. This is the stormwater. In just a minute, Commissioner, I'm going to have the engineer come up and talk through it. In closing, we would just cite the staff report that says site currently contains a community food pantry, so really this is a continuation of the existing use that has been there a long time. Expansion of the community food pantry and a variety of social outreach programs. The church is providing a center that represents the feel of the residential area while being large enough to allow for expanded social outreach services needed in the community. No neighbors attended the pre-development meeting. We were not aware of any protests until we did get the one letter this week. It had no statements on it, so we're not sure exactly what that protest is about. That amounts to about 2%. So with that, let me have the stormwater engineer come up and answer your question, Commissioner, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Chris Anderson of SMC.
Good evening, Commissioners. As I said, Chris Anderson with SMC Engineering. Your question about the rainfall data, that is historical rainfall data that we use.
Okay, so it's not looking at future rainfall. The reason I ask is that the predictions are that future rainfall will be less frequent, but in stronger bursts when it comes down. And so obviously it's a good question if you're thinking about detention ponds.
Right. No, that's the criteria that we use for the,
Okay.
the city of Norman that requires us to use that certain data, and that's historical
Okay.
data.
A second question, have you all considered using some kind of pervious concrete? You know, it looks like a lot of the grass area is replaced with a drive-through.
No, I don't think we're using pervious concrete. You can see on the drawing, we've identified a couple of areas where we think we can use rain gardens as an LID measure. And we're picking up everything in roof drains and an underground system and piping it over to, there's an existing detention pond there on the east, and we're actually expanding that to handle this additional capacity from that area.
Sure, thank you.
Maybe our engineer on the commission might also chime in about pervious concrete, but pervious concrete historically has not been terribly favorable to my understanding in Oklahoma because of our freeze and heat cycle. It is more porous and it does require more maintenance. It has dust that collects inside of it. So it has to be cleaned out every couple of years. And in addition, it's more prone to crack and require replacement sooner. I've looked at it for properties of my own. So that is not commonly used here in Oklahoma compared to places that have more moderate temperatures regularly. So
You're on point.
I've looked at it before. Also, the city of Norman considers pervious concrete in the same ratios as impervious land. So even if the concrete is technically pervious, it is still considered impervious ground from my understanding. So for those ratios. That's a good question. So, all right, I have some questions about the drive-through and would like to know just a little bit more specifically about the function of that, the number of cars maybe currently in there, how many would be lining up, a little bit more of what the peak might look like, specifically maybe addressing concerns that might back out onto Sims and traffic concerns there. So,
Right, I'm going to have one of the McFarland people that work this often to talk to you through that. So Rod Foster, who is with McFarland and is really stewarding this project, has worked the food pantry many times. Rod, why don't you tell them how it operates and how it typically goes through the
You bet. So the operation has changed over the last 2 or 3 years because of the pandemic, threw us a curve. And so before, the operation was people coming into the house, and they would kind of do a shopping loop. And it was not uncommon to have the hallway of the house full and about 20 or 30 people standing outside, and then they would park across in that west lot. Whenever the pandemic came along, we could not operate in the building any longer. And so we set up as a drive-through kind of operation. And over the last couple of years, whenever the weather was really bad, I think our food pantry never shut down, except for, I think, 2 days within that whole time. So we've had people dressed very warmly, standing out there serving people food when everything else was shut down. What we have tried to accomplish with the building is accommodating both of those interests. Some people like to come inside and kind of shop, so they get to pick the things that they like rather than us giving them kind of a standard bag. And so that's something they've liked. Other people, I think, have found the drive-through to be more manageable because some people can't get out of their cars very easily and come in and so forth. So what you see in the design is accommodating those two things. So there's the one area that'll be a shopping area where people will park in the parking lot across the street that's there already. And the drive-through would be for those people who then have preferred to just drive by and get more of a standard shopping bag. And really, it's 2 or 3 bags. So what the design of the drive-through is to accommodate those people who choose to drive up and get a standard pack, and it also accommodates those people who would want to go over to the parking lot, come in, and walk back to their car, but can't carry that many groceries at one time. So they can go back to their car and drive around and pick those up as well. We operate from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Tuesdays and Thursdays, so it's 2 days a week. People can come every 2 weeks. So, and in the days, say currently, we're probably in about the 100 to maybe 120 clients that will show up So in 6 hours, that's maybe 20 cars or so if everybody drove through. I think once we have the building in place, what we expect is that we'll see half of those 20 will be in the parking lot, or I don't know what the mix will be, and the others will be driving through. That's the same number of people that we're managing and have managed through the alley. So we think it'll actually make it a little bit easier.
I wanted to ask Rod too, if you will, Rod, to talk about your mobile food pantry too, which this building will also serve.
Right.
And that's a remote food pantry.
Yes, another aspect of, that was begun in the food pantry, and I'll look at Richard, I don't know about how many years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we found that there was a need with the schools to have families that needed food, and yet they could not get to our food pantry between 10 and 4. Maybe parents are working, whatever. And so we partnered with 4 schools in the Norman community, and we actually go to the schools. We have a box truck, and the group loads up, and they go on Tuesdays, and they rotate around to those different schools. And also that we have it sometimes every other Saturday, I think, where those parents who could not make it to the school can come to the church on Saturday for an hour and a half or so. So that's been a very important project to the schools. I think if you talk to those principals, you'll find out that's a really important part of what they're doing. That food pantry, so from a standpoint of cars going through, maybe half of the 20 an hour, something like that. Otherwise, they'll be in the west lot. The other things that I know we've talked a little bit about is we get twice a month a delivery from the food bank, which is a large truck, and that's the other aspect that we'll have, and because I know people are concerned about, well, you know, how often you get these deliveries. So it's really twice a month. And then we have a number of people who go out and actually pick up produce from stores like Target and I think Aldi's, others, and they will donate produce or food that's going to go to waste, and they will use, so the people picking up will use that driveway as well just to unload those products that they pick up. So that's pretty much what will be going on in that driveway.
Rod, I had a question for you. Someone who's been dropping off kids at daycare for the last 6 years, just in the parking lot. I'm familiar with the Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you don't drive in that, you know, on that little cut through. Well, logistically, will anything change there? And also want to say thank you for your service and everything you're doing there. So
That's one of the things that we are believing is going to improve, actually, because if you probably know right now that when we start at 10, you know, there's always those people that come at 9:45 or whatever. We've actually tried to move those hours to 10 to let the parents dropping off get there and get the kids and get out. But basically, we are staging in that alley. And if you look on the map here, I think it shows like 6 cars. So we believe that we've got the opportunity to have 6 cars come in and get off of that alley. Oh, hit that yet. And so it will relieve, I think, some of the things that we've had going there. But we're trying to we just try to work with the food pantry as best we can, so we're not overlapping.
Thank you. And just clarifying from your comments that the parking for the walk-in is always in the parking lot across the street.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I would just, thank you, Rod. I would just, CCB FBC allows for off-site parking as well, and even allows for within 1,000 feet. I would also just reference, you see on the screen that semi-truck drawing, so Rick has designed this so the semi-truck can come in and get out easily without having to impede any other traffic.
Thank you. I have a question regarding the design, in particular, the side that will be facing the residential home that is to the north. I saw one view that looked like it was from the south to the alley. I wanted to know, would the view to the north be comparable to that view? Is it symmetrical?
Rick McKinney's designed this site for the building, so I'll have
Good evening. Yes, the view you see on the right-hand side will be symmetrical to the north side. And our design intent in the building was to do a two-story structure, which resembled a lot of the neighboring houses in that area with a low hip roof. And he already mentioned the roof, which is, I think, a really nice enhancement for that. But it will have the red brick and kind of the stucco upper band as well.
Any other questions for the applicant? Stole the floor a little bit. Okay. Seeing none, are there any audience comments? And if there are, if you will please fill out the tan sheet of paper, which is on the cart, I believe. And then when you come up to speak, just make sure you say your name and your address to start. And I will set a 3-minute limit. So if you would like a heads up 30 seconds before the 3 minutes up, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to give you the full 3 minutes. And at the end of the 3 minutes, thank you for the comments. And I can see someone's coming up now. Thank you very much. And you can just bring the piece of paper up here when you're done. I think if you've got questions for commission and things, I would include those there, and then the commission can discuss and then take questions to the applicants.
Hi, I'm Jamila Wilcox. I live at 322 South University Boulevard, which is the house to the north, east corner that they're talking about, west corner. And so I had some of the same concerns that you guys have expressed. For example, this is a huge building. I mean, that's actually 2 lots it's sitting on. There used to be 2 houses there. That corner already floods regularly because of all the pavement. And so I have some concerns, like you said, with the increasing rain amounts, about their water retention plan not being sufficient to keep that street from flooding anytime it rains. Like I said, it's also, the one picture they had of the residential section, they posted that they took that picture from as far away from the residential section as possible, which makes it look like there's a huge amount of space between this building and the residential section. There is not. This building is sitting right on the corner, right across the street from residential properties. Like I said, and it's like I said, those are not small houses, and that are right there. But this thing is huge. It's way bigger. I didn't quite understand in the drawings where the drive-through is going to be and where the truck delivery is going to be. I know it's happening in the alley right now, but it sounded like they were moving that out of the alley, and onto Sims Street, which again puts that all happening over next to the residential part rather than keeping it on the other side away from the residential part. Like I said, I understand it's a food pantry. I certainly applaud the work that they're doing with that. I work with people that help with that food pantry. They do great work. Like I said, I just had some issue, and unfortunately I did not see the notice for the plan development meeting, so I didn't make it to that. Like I said, I just had concerns about the immense scale of this building that's going into this neighborhood. I said, I know on their side it's all church, but right across the street are houses where people live. And you talked about the end of it. It's, the front facing out that we're looking at here does kind of match, but the ends just look like a brick office building sitting there. So, and I did have a question about the mission center part and what, do they have a specific list of uses for that? Is that known, or does it get to be just whatever they decide to put in there later that could generate a lot more traffic than what they're talking about now? I mean, I kind of question their traffic specs in that when you've built this beautiful big place and made it very easy, I think that's going to increase your traffic. And I'm not sure that they accounted for that in their numbers. But like I said, I also question what other things are going to happen under community mission that could be drastically increasing traffic there as well. So like I said, they made me file it as a protest to be able to talk, but a lot of it was just questions, trying to understand what's going on and point out some issues that I hadn't seen addressed.
Thank you very much. I would like to go ahead and address some of the questions and concerns on there too. In a planned unit development, all of the uses are going to be specified in there. So the document should be available online, is where I'm looking for help. If not, your planning office would be happy to provide that. That is public availability, so you can see the full list. When we had as Sean Rieger mentioned, there was a similar item that we approved for food and shelter that was in a different area of town, and those uses included a lot of casework, in particular, was what they were attempting to do. I think the parties here would probably be better suited to kind of visit with you, and it sounds like you've got a lot of people here that are very happy to talk to you about it too, so I would encourage some phone numbers be exchanged too. In addition, I do think it's always helpful to know there is an additional point where protests can be brought up and comments can be heard for City Council. So there is an additional place that past Planning Commission, if this passes here, that it can also be brought up. Especially since I know you mentioned you didn't make it to the pre-development meeting to be able to discuss that. So yeah, I think that's good to know. So for point of reference, do you have the square footage of this building that maybe you could share for us, Mr. Rieger?
I believe the footprint is about 5,000 square feet, and I can answer a few of those other questions if you wish me to, Madam Chair.
Does any other commissioners have any questions that they'd like the applicant to address based on the comments we had?
I assume you're going to address this, but just wanted to clarify the drive-through with semi drop-off and how that circular logistics will work.
I'd be happy to, Commissioner. As to the size as well, I would just reference that the form-based codes ask for at least 2 stories, at least, of this particular site. So it could be larger, and I understand the neighbor's concern, but this could be a much larger building if we were to follow the confines of the CCFBC. And as to stormwater, we're allowed to do up to 85% with low impact. You heard from the stormwater engineer how we are doing that. So we feel we've accommodated those concerns. There is the truck traffic you could see. And this is actually an improvement to the site because, again, as was discussed before, as you highlighted, there has traditionally just been the alley, and that is a public alley between the main McFarland building and this site. Now we will have a 2-lane drive that can help offset that need with truck space to go up through that alley and able to park and not block the alley anymore, which is always in the best interest of the public that we're not blocking a public alley. So we think that will work quite well. One other thing as to the different uses, it is in your table on page 40 of item 3. You see that list. It's also in the PUD document. And I would just ask you to also understand, maybe I can show, there you go. So across the street is a large parking lot. And one of the things we see this often in churches is realize the obvious part of that is that on Sunday mornings, that parking lot gets very full. But that's about the only time that parking lot usually gets very full unless there are special events such as funerals or other things. And so churches are one of the great examples of where we could do shared parking. So a mission center like this with those other uses can function very, very well with parking directly across the street, even when the church is functioning on Sunday morning. So it tends to work very well. Thank you.
Just to clarify, the entrance is Sims and then exits to the alley. Is that how I am viewing this? Unless I am mistaken, but it looks like the entrance, I don't know if that was answered clearly, but the entrance is from Sims down through the behind the building, exiting to the alley.
I think it's actually, Commissioner, the opposite of that.
Okay.
I believe they will come up through the alley and go north.
So it's entering from the alley, going behind the building, and then exiting on Sims.
Correct.
Okay. I don't know if we can toggle back. I wanted to see that south view, not the front view that would be to the parking lot, but the next slide to that.
This one?
Yes. So I do have some concerns about the view of this because that side is what the parties across the street to the north will see in front of their residential house. If this is, I understand that this is the south view, but if it's the same view on the north, this is the same thing that the parties on the north would see, which is basically a big institutional wall, and I'm not making any judgment calls on here. I know there are a lot of financial needs that go into this with architectural designs, but something with a gable, something that looked a little bit more like a frontage, even if there wasn't actually a door there, I think might, kind of similar to what was kind of going on, might give a little bit more of an aesthetic appeal to that and those residential houses. I think in particular we didn't have a lot of people that came and commented on this item, but we had a lot of people that have come out before in the area around CCFI and those areas, and expressing concerns when residential areas that have institutional areas become increasingly incorporated by institutional, and how that kind of affects them. So even though there may not be other citizens here, I think we've heard that from Norman citizens before about seeing these other institutional things that are in the residential neighborhood. I think we should be mindful of, and architecture is a great way to help address that and maybe soften some of those institutional feels next to those residential areas.
We will take that into consideration. Thank you for those comments.
Right. Any other questions or Planning Commission discussion?
I'd just, further reiterate, whatever we can do to soften the view on the north side, given that that is the residential side, I would echo that encouragement.
I was just going to say, she'd had concern about the drainage there, and I think for this, just looking at this, obviously there's no calculations, but I think they've done a really good job of taking an area and probably alleviating a little bit of the drainage issues there by moving the water off to the other side of the block. The real problem is probably this structure out in the road's undersized in the first place, like all that stuff on Lindsay used to be that they had to redo. So I think that's probably one of the main problems there. The engineer could speak to it, but I'm pretty sure that's the problem.
Thank you for noticing that, Sean. This is one of those instances where, normally we're saying we're not adding to a problem, but in this case, we are actually, I think, helping it. That area right now, surface drains out to the street without any detention, and even though we're increasing the impervious area now, we're capturing all that area and taking it to a detention pond, so routing it away from that area.
One other comment to that, just what we face in this area, we faced it with the Noun and other things, is we have very limited subsurface stormwater drain in existence in this area of town. So there's pretty limited measures we could take.
Any other comments? I just want to add, I really love the organization and the work. Even though it's our job to be very critical of projects, I applaud the work that you guys do and appreciate the services you provide to the community. So, all right, I would take a motion if one would be presented.
I move to approve.
Second.
And a vote.
You may vote. Everyone has voted, and the motion carried 7-0.
Thank you. Moving on to miscellaneous comments. So are there, does staff have any miscellaneous information for commission?
I just wanted to note, on the next meeting, you'll see on the agenda, we need to elect a secretary. It will be, but we are without one right now, so we need to be thinking about it, whoever wants to step up and sign paperwork when needed.
I was going to ask, can you remind us of the duties of the secretary?
You'll sign the minutes, and that's it, is it?
And
Because,
step in if the chair.
well, and step in, yeah, so if we hadn't had anybody tonight, you would step in, but, yeah. And if you're not here, maybe you'll just get elected, and that would just be the way it would go, I guess. So be sure and attend the next meeting.
Getting voluntold to.
What's the culture? You're automatic if you don't come, or you
All right, and if anybody's interested in being secretary, feel free to let me know, and I will be happy to nominate you. Or nominate yourself next time. Okay, any commissioners have any comments? All right, seeing none, if there's nothing else to come before the commission, I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the participants who came too.